take it home where you spread it around. If you don't like who's in there, vote them out. That's what election day is all about. And the biggest gun we got is called the ballot box. If you don't like who's in there, vote them out. Vote them out. Vote them out. And when they're gone, we'll sing and dance and shout. And she'll bring some new ones in, and they will start the show again. And if you don't like who's in there, vote them out.
This is a special report from WBRN Radio and the Boston Red Network on the 24th of March 2019, the Mueller report. And we will attach the 4-page report in its entirety to this broadcast and make some minimal commentary here. Basically, the Mueller report submitted by the Attorney General Barr is what was expected, and we'll just go to it. The Attorney General is the Washington, D.C., the 24th of May 2019, the Honorable Lindsey Graham, Chair of the Committee on the Judiciary of the U.S. Senate, the Honorable Jared Nadler, Chair of the Committee on the Judiciary, U.S. House of Representatives. Doug Collin, Ranking Member of the Committee on the Judiciary, U.S. House of Representatives, that is at the Longworth Office Building, and in the Senate, the Honorable Dianne Feinstein, Ranking Member. Dear Chairman Graham, Chairman Nadler, Ranking Member Feinstein, Ranking Member Collins. As a supplement to the notification provided on Friday, March 22nd, I'm writing today to advise you of the principal conclusion reached by the Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller III, and to inform you about the status of my initial review of the report he has prepared. The Special Counsel's report on Friday, the Special Counsel submitted to me a confidential report explaining the prosecution are the declination of decisions he has reached as required by 28 CFR 600.8C. This report, entitled Report on the Investigation into Russian Interference in the 2016 Presidential Election. Although my review is ongoing, I believe it is in the public interest to describe the report and to summarize the principal conclusions reached by the Special Counsel and the results of his investigation. The report explains that the Special Counsel and his staff thoroughly investigated allegations that members of the presidential campaign of D.J. Trump and others associated with it conspired with the Russian government in efforts to interfere in the 2016 U.S. presidential election or sought to obstruct the related federal investigations. In the report, the Special Counsel noted that in completing his investigation, he employed 19 lawyers who were assigned by a team of approximately 40 FBI agents, intelligence analysts, forensic accountants, and other professional staff. The Special Counsel issued more than 2,800 subpoenas, executed nearly 500 search warrants, obtained more than 230 orders for communication records, issued more than 50 orders authorizing the use of PIN registers, made 13 requests to foreign governments for evidence, and interviewed approximately 500 witnesses. The Special Counsel obtained a number of indictments and convictions of individuals and entities in connection with this investigation, all of which have been publicly disclosed. During the course of his investigation, the Special Counsel also referred several matters to other offices for further action. The report does not recommend any further indictments, nor does the Special Counsel obtain any sealed indictments that are yet to be made public. Below, I summarize the principal conclusion set out by the Special Counsel report. Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. The special counsel reports are divided into two parts. The first describing the results of the special counsel investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election, and the report outlines the Russian efforts to influence the election and documents criminal conduct by persons associated with the Russian government in connection with those efforts. The report further explains that primary consideration for the special counsel investigations was whether any American, including individuals associated with the Trump campaign, joined of the Russian conspiracies to influence the election, which would be a federal crime. The special counsel investigation did not find that the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it conspired or coordinated with the Russians with Russia in an effort to influence the 2016 presidential election. As the report states, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. The special counsel's investigation determined there were two main Russian efforts to influence the 2016 election. They involved attempts by a Russian organization, the Internet Research Agency, to conduct disinformation and social media operations in the U.S. designated to sow social discord, evidently with the aim of interfering with the election. As noted above, the special counsel did not find that any U.S. person or Trump campaign official or associate conspired or knowingly coordinated with the IRA in its efforts, although the special counsel brought criminal charges against a number of Russian nationals and entities in connection with these activities. The second element involved of the Russian government's effort to conduct computer hacking operations designed to gather information and disseminate information to influence the election. The special counsel found that the Russian government's actors successfully hacked into computers and obtained emails from persons affiliated with the Clinton campaign and the Democratic Party organizations and publicly disseminated those materials through various intermediaries, including WikiLeaks. Based on these activities, the special counsel brought criminal charges against a number of Russian military officials for conspiring to hack into computers in the United States for purpose of interfering with the election. But as noted above, the special counsel did not find that the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it conspired or coordinated with the Russian government efforts, despite multiple offers from Russian-affiliated individuals to assist the Trump campaign. Obstruction of justice. The report's second part addresses a number of actions by the president, most of which have been subject of public reporting, that the special counsel investigated as potentially raising obstruction of justice concerns. After making a thorough, factual investigation into these matters, the special counsel concluded whether to elevate the conduct under the department's standards governing prosecution and declination decisions, but ultimately determined not to make a traditional prosecutorial judgment. The special counsel therefore did not draw a conclusion in one way or another as to whether the examined conduct constitute obstruction. Instead, each of the relevant actions investigated the report set out evidence on both sides of the question and leaves unresolved what the special counsel viewed as difficult issues of law and fact concerning whether the president's action and intent could be viewed as obstruction. The special counsel stated that while the report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it does not exonerate him. The special counsel's decision to describe the facts of this obstruction investigation without reaching any legal conclusions leaves it to the Attorney General to determine whether the conduct described in the report constituted a crime. Over the course of the investigation, the special counsel's office engaged in discussions with certain officials regarding many of the legal and factual matters at issue in the Special Counsel's obstruction investigation. After reviewing the Special Counsel's final report on these issues, consulting with department officials, including the Office of Legal Counsel, and applying the principle of federal prosecutions that guide other charging decisions, the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rothstein and I concluded that the evidence developed during the Special Counsel's investigation is not sufficient to establish that the President committed an obstruction of justice offense. Our determination was made without regard to and is not based on the constitutional considerations that surround the indictment and the criminal prosecution of a sitting President. In making this determination, we note that the Special Counsel recognized that the evidence does not establish that the President was involved in underlying crime related to the Russian interference, and that, while not determining the absence of such evidence, bears upon the President's intent with respect to obstruction. Generally speaking, to obtain and sustain an obstruction conviction, the government would need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a person acting with corrupt intent engaged in obstructive conduct with a sufficient access to a pending or contemplated proceeding, in categorizing the President's action, many of which took place in public view. The report identifies no action in our judgment that constitutes obstructive conduct and has a nexus to pending or contemplative proceedings and were done with corrupt intent, each of which, under the Department's principles of federal prosecution guiding charges, decisions would need to be approved beyond a reasonable doubt to establish an obstruction of justice offense. As I previously stated, however, that I'm mindful that the public interest in this matter. For that reason, my goal and intent is to release as much Special Counsel report as I can, consistent with applicable laws, regulations, and department policies. Based upon my discussions with the special prosecutor, my initial review, it is apparent that the report contains material that is or could be subject to the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure 6, which imposes restrictions on the use and disclosure of information related to materials occurring before a grand jury. Federal Criminal Procedure 6C to B, that is Rule 6E, generally limits disclosure of certain grand jury information in criminal investigation and prosecution. Disclosure of 6E material beyond the strict limits set forth in the rule is criminal in certain circumstances. See 18 U.S. Code 401(3). The restriction protects the integrity of the grand jury proceeding and ensures that the unique and invaluable investigative powers of the grand jury are used to strictly for the intent of criminal justice functions. Given the restrictions, the schedule for processing the report depends in part on how quickly the Department of Justice can identify 6E material that by law cannot be made public. I have requested the assistance of Special Counsel in identifying all 6E material contained in the report as quickly as possible. Separately, I must identify any information that could impact ongoing matters, including those that Special Counsel referred to other offices. As soon as the process is completed, I will be in a position, this is William Barr speaking, to move forward expeditiously in determining that we can reach, in the light of applicable law, regulations, and department procedures. As I observed in my initial notification, the Special Counsel regulations provide that the Attorney General may determine that the public release of notification to your respective committees would be in the public interest. That is 28 CFR 600.9. I've also determined, and I will disclose this letter to the public after delivering to you. Sincerely, William P. Barr, Attorney General. This is very interesting, and all along we've talked about this report. Now, one has to understand that this is a report based upon the federal rules of evidence, somewhat similar to findings that the Department of Justice makes in the murders that you have seen from one corner of the nation to another of young African males, that there is no federal indictment issued on violations of civil rights. The statutes contained in are very similar. Now, an attorney under a federal attorney, federal prosecutor, with a grand jury could literally indict, as they say, a ham sandwich, or pastrami, or roast beef, or whatever. However, and in the Watergate trial, there were many of these types of indictments, and they were under Judge Maximum John Sirica. There's no evidence in this case that there is any Maximum John Sirica available. And also remember that DJ Trump appointed Barr, who has a history. He is a Republican type. Many reports a hatchet person or hatchet man. So in other words, you knew what to expect. Now, as far as the evidentiary importance of this report, it doesn't have very much at this juncture. But there are two legs to it. There is the legal requirements under Department of Justice procedure, and the federal criminal statutes there of criminal procedure. And there is the political part. Now, the political part is what the House and Senate would be interested in, and that is totally a different situation, particularly in the House, where they can gather evidence on these various committees and even draft articles of impeachment. Now, you could impeach technically a president for eating a pastrami sandwich. In DJ Trump's case, Big Mac, extra fries, and Diet Coke. But would that wash with the public overall? The answer is no. So the Democrats and various other functionaries, obstructionists, whatever, in Congress will gather whatever evidence and spin it in a direction that they are going. Now remember, this report, and it's mentioned in the report, usually in a report they would not mention the word does not exonerate. They would just simply say they found no criminal intent here and leave it at that. No criminal intent doesn't mean... This is sort of like the O.J. trial, in that the jury found O.J. not guilty, which they should have. Well, then they came with a civil trial. Of course, it was rigged. We don't want to set anything the House to do to that. But, and found O.J. civilly liable, and thus gave an award much more than could be given. But there are other restraints in this particular matter, so we're not going to see that kind of action occur. You'll hear various pundits. We were listening at Whoop Blitzer and some of his people talk about it, and he was reading, but he only read the preamble to the letter. We actually read the entire letter, and not only that, we will attach it. So do look at it, at least scan the valuable parts of it. You'll have it reported out to you in various segments, hopefully not in 30 seconds or 2-minute segments. We do think that it deserves more than what is given out there, and we leave it to the listener to judge. And if you read the PDF, you will figure out what the Attorney General Barr is basically saying. That they found no criminal intent in the Trump campaign, his various associates, front groups, etc. Now, other people were indicted for various things, lying to the FBI, period. And there are also ongoing grand jury investigations in New York of various Trump entities not related to Russia. Now, this whole Russian situation, since obviously they have never interviewed any sources in the Russian Federation, is very one-sided. And they also maintain in here that WikiLeaks was contacted. WikiLeaks does not deny they were contacted, but they were not contacted by this group in the Russian Federation. And also their efforts by the federal government acted as an indictment. It's not been unsealed, charging Julian Assange with certain kinds of crimes under the early 1900 Espionage Act. So there are a lot of things going on here on the sideline of this whole situation. Will the American public get the full Monty here? Perhaps no. But how valuable is this in the political content? Not very valuable at all, in our opinion. And the problem here is this: every day that DJ Trump stays on what we used to call the proverbial front page, now it's on the headline in the social media. And we include the social media. We're talking about like the New York Times. We're talking about the Washington Post. These are newspapers that are online, so it's not really that. But on Facebook, you'll hear all sorts of things. And on Twitter, there'll be side issues to this. There'll be other exculpatory evidence brought up. But in this particular situation, the way the Department of Justice is set up, now you have to understand, the Department of Justice has procedures, and some of those in the 2016 campaign were broken, particularly when the FBI Director Comey went out and explained that Hillary Rodham Clinton was under the microscope. And his first situation was that she would not be indicted. Well, so what? But that did interfere with her campaign. And then they came out with some materials found on Hunter Abad computer in their investigation of her husband, who incidentally is now out of Vina, who is now out of jail. But it had nothing to do with the Hillary Clinton campaign, and they found out by some mysterious reason that these so-called emails were emails taken from the server. Period. The Hillary server. Now, this so-called server was similarly to what we use in some instances, where we collect email on a server through a program called Thunderbird, and several others. We use Pine. Anyway, getting into what we use to collect our emails from various sources out there, Gmail, etc., whatever emails we'll have, and from our own internal that is there, and the server is used. But this particular server that she had is very similar to some of the operations we use. They had a designated aggregator, ISP, you can call them whatever they want, that collected this data from Hillary, from an AOL account and various other accounts. It was all forwarded into the Hillary server, and she used HillaryClinton.com to conduct that. Now, many people, it's found that they now have included WhatsApp and the various other things into what they use. The former General Powell used AOL. G.W. Bush used AOL. That is quite common in the age in which we now live to use these accounts. But under the Government Records Act, government officials have to use government .gov accounts. So that is different. And of course, in the Secretary of State, you have various types of accounts. You have accounts for, we'll say, light emails, and for classified system, which is handled differently. But now you're dealing with a campaign, a Trump campaign, which they use the Trump accounts and who knows, hundreds of other .coms, .nets were all in this information. So these were some of the issues that the Special Prosecutor's Office in issuing subpoenas, not only for people, but subpoenas, or types of subpoenas you issue for materials. In other words, if you need certain materials, we'll say, for instance, keep it very simple here, a set of books, you issue that to the individual and describe that you want a set of their books that have debits and credits in it. The accounting of records, in other words, it's a record keeping of what you want people to bring. Production, what we usually call it, motion to produce. That's in the discovery process. That is in both under the criminal rules of procedure and the civil rules of federal rules of procedure, which are very similar to what most states follow under the Uniform Commercial Code. That is civil. But here you're going to find all kinds of things. You have these committees here, Judiciary Committee in the House, the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. Lindsey Graham, he's going to try to spin it to the president. And then you have Jerry Nadler's Judiciary Committee. But all of these committees, they can subpoena people. They have the power to subpoena people. They also have the power to subpoena records. So that is very similar to production motions to proceed, and they can hold people in contempt of Congress. So they have a lot of power here, very similar to what the Department of Justice. Now, the Department of Justice is very limited in what they do. But our concern here is more time. We don't want to waste valuable political time on something that is going virtually nowhere. First of all, you look at it from a very practical point of view. But the Trump supporters, this will not sway them. This will just energize them, and that is the Republican Party, most of it. For independents, you can hope to get a 50-50 split. We'll look at some polling after this. We'll get that later. So in other words, that is some of the instances that you're up against, period. And you have all the campaigns out. Incidentally, we'll have a special report. Kristen Gillibrand kicked off her campaign in front of the Trump International Hotel in New York. And we'll have her speech in its entirety as we cover campaign 2020. And we have another segment coming called On the Road. We were going to turn into a special program. Maybe we will do that. We've been tracking some of these people. Bernie was in Los Angeles this weekend. Beto O'Rourke was everywhere. We found him in the morning, and in the afternoon he was in South Carolina driving the mayor around. And then the next thing we know, at night he's in Nevada. So in Las Vegas. So I mean, he is literally everywhere. Vito is running almost 24/20. He's driving, he's on aeroplanes, etc. So you'll see all this. This is kind of unusual. In the Watergate, for those of us who were around there, Tricky Dick had won a landslide election over our candidate, Dr. George McGovern of South Dakota. But then Tricky's whole operation started falling apart with a special committee called CREEP. And they were in the business of paying people off. Literally, they had a burglary at Daniel Ellsberg, a psychiatrist's office, and various other things that they had done where they violated laws. Now, this situation is a little bit different in that primarily around the Russian investigation. Now, this was the hacking of several people, including John Poindexter's emails of the Democratic National Committee, and of course that showed that they were plotting against Bernie Sanders. So what was the intent there? And also on top of this, let's just go back to some history. The federal government, the U.S. government, under Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton's State Department, funneled money directly, and this was not dark money or anything, to NGOs in the Russian Federation, in the Ukraine, to influence the governments there. In other words, to propagandize, to pay for social media, etc. So this is nothing new. You have nation states that are outlawed by statute from directly giving to candidates, but at the same time, you had these operatives interfering, particularly through Facebook, should be Spacebook, and that was a different organization, through them at Cambridge Analytica, who is traced back to this right-wing nut, I don't remember his name right now, that was very prominent in the Trump organization. So you're going to see much more ground level investigating here off of these committees, which they have time to do it. The special counsel spent over 2 years, but again, the special counsel office, the way it was set up, was handicapped in the very beginning, and also noting that a lot of this was done on the Department of Justice, whereas in the Watergate affair, although Archibald Cox was fired, etc., but you had the action, so to speak, was down at the federal courthouse under Maximum John Sirica. Judge Sirica was overseeing the grand jury there. And there was another grand jury also, as I recall. But that was where the action was. It was not with the special prosecutor's office, because they didn't even have the Special Prosecutor Act at that time. So that's one thing, a very important thing to remember. This will be developing, but again, our bottom line is much of this time is being wasted. What Barr will find when the final report is cleansed, we'll say, somewhat. This is supposedly directly protecting individuals that have not been indicted. But again, we have the statistics there as to how many individuals that have been indicted, etc. But we encourage you to look at the report and see exactly where it is. Now, they talk about 19 attorneys is nothing. 40 FBI agents is nothing. 2,800 subpoenas, 500 warrants. Be very suspicious of round numbers. And 230 orders for communication records were issued. Almost 50 orders authorizing the use of PIN registers, making 13 requests to foreign governments, probably weren't most, and interviewing again 500 witnesses. That's an approximation there. Impressive but not impressive is all we can say for this particular situation. Let me go very quickly. We just want to get a little bit of sport in here. This would be the men's basketball Final Four. We have the Monday morning quarterback coming up. We'll finish up our sporting events from the weekend, and we'll get it. We may or may not get to ESPN. I'm not sure about that. We'll try to get to ESPN. Let me just we'll get the scores here now from them. Now this would be from wait a minute here. Oh, I guess we are actually going on here. I was thinking we had ended this. I guess we're rounding out. We still have it going on. So, all right. The University of Washington evidently was eliminated by North Carolina, 81-59. Tennessee over Iowa in an overtime, 83-77. Now the games later today, as they set this Sweet 16, Duke and UCF. Texas Tech, the Red Raiders, there to be at 6:10 Eastern Time in Buffalo. Virginia Tech and the Liberty University, Virginia and Oklahoma, that'll be at around about 8 o'clock Houston and Ohio State, and UC Irvine and the Oregon Ducks. That'll be a very interesting one. Let's see, the line, the over-under combined there is 127 there, 0.5. That is the over-under. So in other words, if you get under, that's the combined score. Or if it's over that, it'll be interesting there. And some of the others, Houston game, they are negative 6-1. That was Houston's favored. Oregon is favored. And the over-under is 132.5. And let me see, that would be at the Bank of Oklahoma. Wait a minute here. Yeah. And who is favored here? University of Virginia is favored over Oklahoma. They are a first-ranked team. And I'm assuming in San Jose, who do we have? Virginia Tech is favored over Liberty. I would agree there. And I think the Texas Tech is favored over Buffalo, and naturally Duke is favored here. The highest scoring game, 142.5 it looks like here, over UCF. And Tennessee is, let me see what's going on. Yeah, it's favored here. And North Carolina was well, yeah, it was favored. And so it actually turned out to be a 20-point game, a roll-away play there. Let me just catch you up on Friday night. That's what we intended to actually do here. Gonzaga 83-71 over Baylor. Michigan State 70-50 over Minnesota. Kentucky 62-56 over Wofford. Michigan 64-49, low scoring game there over Florida. Florida State 90 to the Cinderella team, Murray State at 62. LSU 69-67, very close game there over Maryland, the Terrapins. And Purdue 87-61 over Villanova. And finally Auburn 89-75 over Kansas. And that was basically the tourney, trying to bring you up to date on the scores. And let me just get the Friday night scores here while we're at it. Duke and North Carolina State, Duke 85-62, Virginia 71-56 over Gardner Webb. North Carolina and Loyola, anyway, 88-73. Texas and Colgate, Texas 77-70. Texas Tech, of course, beat Northern. Kentucky 72-56. Never looked back. Houston 84-55 over Georgia State. Buffalo and Arizona State. It was all Buffalo there, 91-75, and the Texas Tech 66-52 over St. Louis. And this was the one that UC Irvine knocked off Kansas State 72-64. The Oregon Ducks and Wisconsin 72-54. Iowa 79-72 over the University of Cincinnati, who used to be a basketball power. Ohio State 62-59, very close game over Iowa State. University of Washington at Seattle 78-61 over Utah State. Oklahoma 95, runaway there over Ole Miss 72, and Liberty 80-79, 4-point game there over Mississippi State. And UCF 73 to 58. Now let's get the bracket here and see where we are as we head towards the Sweet 16. Won't spend a lot of time here, but we are moving towards the 16. Let me see when the 16. Yeah, that'll be on the 28th and 29th of March. We're in the second round now, and that's basically all you need to know. This will do it for us. We'll see you on the Monday Morning Quarterback. Incidentally, Numbers Man, our financial or economics report from the macro perspective, is up on WBRN and the Boston Red Network, the Numbers Man division, and the open source report is coming shortly. One of the principal parts of it will be the Bourne's 737, I believe, Max 8 X9, the software that is in them. And we'll see you on the Monday Morning Quarterback on Monday morning.